In a crumbling parish ledger of the 19th century lies a name not written in ink, but in something darker, something that stains like tar. The entry is unfinished, and yet it chills the marrow with its simplicity. The hollow child, called Labubu. For generations, villagers whispered it as both warning and curse, a creature born from laughter that soured into screams. And tonight, we turn those forbidden pages. Before we begin, if you are drawn to forgotten histories and haunted tales, subscribe now so the echoes of the past may never be silenced. The first mention of Labubu in spoken memory came not from the priests or the scholars, but from the children themselves. They whispered it in play, as though it were a game, daring one another to laugh into the dark and call the hollow child's name. They said it appeared when the joy of laughter bent too far, when delight twisted into fear. A group of children gathered by the chapel one winter's night, trading ghost stories beneath their cloaks. Their laughter rose sharp and high, echoing against the frost-stiff walls, until a single candle guttered and died. In the silence that followed, they swore they heard something else, a giggle not belonging to any of them. Light returned, and one child was gone. The adults dismissed the tale as imagination, for what was more natural than children inventing monsters to give shape to their fears? Yet when the thaw came and the snow melted from the chapel steps, tiny footprints ringed the door. They were not bare feet, nor animal paws, but something in between, prints clawed at the tips, small and erratic, circling in restless spirals. No adult confessed to carving them. No child was bold enough to claim them. Still, the marks returned with each spring. What disturbed the elders most was not only the footprints, but their placement. They always appeared outside the chapel, as though the creature, if creature it was, circled the very threshold of sanctity, never daring to enter, yet never straying far. The priests interpreted this as proof of evil, a thing kept at bay by faith. But the villagers had another belief. They thought Labubu lingered near the house of worship not because it was repelled, but because it fed on what it found there. The laughter of weddings, the tears of funerals, the fragile hope that clung to prayer, these were not mere rituals to the hollow child. They were nourishment. The ledger itself offers no explanation, only the single unfinished line, written in that black substance. Some swore it was tar, others dried blood, and a few dared to whisper that it was something worse, ink drawn from the hollow where Labubu's heart should have been. No hand admitted to writing it, no priest claimed responsibility. And yet, the entry endured, the letters stark, as if burned into the page. From that moment onward, Labubu was no longer a fleeting story passed among children. It became a shadow stitched into the fabric of the village itself, half ignored in daylight but undeniable once darkness pressed close. As years pressed on, whispers of the hollow child turned into warnings etched into daily life. Mothers told their children not to laugh too loud after dusk, and fathers barred them from wandering near the orchards when the moon was thin. The legend had become a discipline, a way of controlling innocence before it could turn careless. Yet for all their caution, the ledger records what could not be ignored, the first disappearance of an entire family. It was Easter Eve when the Caro household fell silent. Neighbors found the home in uncanny order, the door unbroken, the hearth still breathing heat. But the family was gone. Not stolen by raiders, not carried off by plague, simply vanished. On the wooden floor of the children's room, toys lay in perfect circles, as though placed with deliberate hands. Each one bore marks, faint indents, no larger than those left by a child's teeth. But no child had placed them there, for the house was empty, its silence heavy, its rooms restless, with a chill that had no source. The villagers searched the woods, combed the riverbanks, even pried open root cellars in the hope of discovering some ordinary explanation. They found nothing. And yet, that night, Those who passed near the orchard swore they heard laughter. It rose and fell like a cruel echo, playful, high-pitched, endless. It was not the laughter of a family reunited, nor the joy of children at play. It was something sharper, hungrier, circling the hollow like a predator delighting in its own hunt. In the weeks that followed, 2 more families vanished in the same fashion. Each disappearance was tied to Easter, each home left strangely intact, as though no violence had occurred. Only the toys remained, arranged in those eerie, meticulous circles, bitten at the edges. Panic swelled, and the parish priest declared it the work of a demon. His sermons grew heated, his voice cracking with fear as he urged the faithful to guard their hearths and their laughter. He told them to snuff out every candle before sleep, for the hollow child was said to drift between shadows, drawn to the flicker of flame as moths are drawn to light. The warnings settled deep into the fabric of the town. Even those who mocked the legend took to dousing candles early, afraid of the possibility that faith alone might not shield them. For what disturbed them most was not what Labubu took, but how it chose. Entire families vanished without trace, yet their homes stood undisturbed. To the villagers, this was no wild beast. It was something selective, intentional, and worst of all, patient. Fear began to weave itself into every habit of the village. It was not loud, not frantic, but quiet and deliberate, the kind of fear that seeps into bone and lingers. Families learned to whisper at supper, to stifle their children's giggles, to let joy be expressed only in daylight where shadows were thinner. It was said that Labubu did not crave flesh the way beasts do, but rather the moment joy bent toward terror, the instant laughter cracked and revealed the silence beneath. That was the flavor it sought, the offering it demanded. And so every household tried to deny it that feast, swallowing their laughter like medicine, pretending solemnity would protect them. But children are children, and silence is not natural to them. A joke slipped out at twilight, a snort of laughter during prayers, and suddenly every ear strained for the giggles said to follow, the hollow child's echo, bright and merciless. The parish warned that even speaking of Labubu could call it closer, that naming the hollow child aloud was like signing one's entry into the ledger. Thus the name was never said after nightfall. Parents struck fear into their young with threats. Laugh too loudly, and the hollow child will hear you. Smile too wide, and it will stand at your window. These words, meant as warnings, only deepened the myth, giving it power that even silence could not undo. The strangest part was how the hollow child seemed less like an intruder and more like an archivist. The stories suggested that Labubu was not content merely to haunt but to record, as if it were keeping its own book alongside the parish ledger. Children taken, families vanished, laughter twisted into screams. All of it was believed to be collected, bound, and kept. Some whispered that Labubu was older than the village itself, a spirit born whenever humans first tried to preserve memory. If the parish ledger was a record of births, deaths, and sacred vows, then Labubu's ledger was its reflection, a darker archive written in shadows. Over time, this belief shaped the identity of the people. They became a community bound less by faith and more by fear of laughter itself. Weddings grew hushed, funerals grew tense, even festivals were muted affairs. And yet, despite all their caution, the stories persisted. Children glimpsed a figure with ears too long crouching near the chapel gate, a crooked smile flashing before vanishing into darkness. No one dared investigate too closely, for what frightened them most was not the creature's appearance, but the sense that it was listening, collecting, and above all, waiting. The legend of the hollow child might have remained locked within the village, if not for the travelers who passed through. Merchants, pilgrims, and wandering priests often heard the whispers, though the villagers were reluctant to speak. When pressed, they offered fragments, a warning not to laugh too loudly, a caution against keeping candles burning past midnight. Most outsiders dismissed these rules as superstition, yet some left behind accounts that deepened the unease. One traveling friar, whose notes were later found among abandoned church records, wrote of hearing children's laughter while crossing the orchard path alone. He described it as close, impossibly close, though no child was visible. His candle lamp sputtered though the night was still, and in its dim glow he glimpsed something small crouching between the roots of a tree. He swore the creature smiled, its teeth pale against the dark, its eyes glittering like glass catching firelight. He hurried on, too afraid to speak, but when he returned days later to share his vision, he was found pale, silent, and unwilling ever to preach again. Merchants traveling with caravans told of toys strewn along the road, small dolls and carved animals arranged in circles. The objects bore bite marks, as though a child had gnawed them, yet the wood was splintered with a force no infant could muster. Some wagons vanished along these routes, their goods never recovered, their drivers never found. To the villagers, this was further proof that Labubu's reach extended beyond their hollow, shadowing any who dared laugh or speak lightly of it. What unsettled most visitors was not only the strange tales, but the way the villagers carried themselves. There was a restraint in their voices, an absence of joy so complete it seemed unnatural. Even festivals lacked music, their dances slow, their faces pale. Outsiders often asked why, and the villagers would only whisper, "The hollow child listens." To live among them was to feel watched, not by human eyes, but by something always lingering just beyond sight. These encounters spread slowly, carried in journals and sermons, until the hollow child became a rumor whispered across neighboring towns. But the further it traveled, the more it changed. Some called Labubu a demon, others a forest spirit, others still a cursed child left unbaptized. The only detail that never shifted was the smile, too wide, too sharp, too knowing. Always it smiled. And so the ledger grew not only in the parish, but in memory. Each new witness added another line, another fragment, another name swallowed by the hollow child's cruel archive. It was the night when even the priests lost their courage that the hollow child's legend shifted from whispered tale to unshakable truth. For years, the clergy had thundered from their pulpits, insisting that faith alone would hold the creature at bay. But faith faltered when Father Aurelius himself vanished. He was last seen in the chapel, kneeling before the altar, muttering prayers against the darkness. By dawn, the doors were still barred from within, the candles melted down to waxy puddles, and yet the chapel was empty. Only one thing remained on the altar, a child's toy horse, its wooden legs marked with teeth. The village could no longer deny it. No longer was Labubu a story used to hush children. It had become a presence that even holy men could not master. That night, families crowded together in silence, their hearths extinguished, their homes cloaked in shadow. They thought stillness might spare them. Yet the quiet was broken by a sound that chilled their marrow, laughter, soft at first, then sharper, darting from house to house like a cruel wind. No door could keep it out. No prayer could drown it. Some swore they saw the creature flitting between lamplight and dark, its small frame bending unnaturally, its ears twitching as though it delighted in their terror. Others claimed they felt its gaze pressing through shutters and cracks, a weight heavier than eyes should bear. And though each family remained hidden, none could banish the thought that their names were being written, one by one, into the hollow child's ledger. After that night, the village changed forever. Weddings grew smaller, celebrated not with laughter, but with hushed vows. Funerals became quieter, as though grief itself might draw its attention. Children were warned not only to silence their joy but to suppress their tears, for even sorrow seemed dangerous. It was as though every emotion risked summoning the thing that fed on extremes. What remained was a people hollowed, neither fully alive nor fully dead, mirroring the creature they feared. The parish ledger bore no more inked records after Aurelius's disappearance. Pages remained blank, brittle, untouched, as though the priests themselves no longer dared set pen to paper. Yet in the village, they whispered that the ledger was not truly empty, that in another book, unseen, the hollow child was writing still, every smile, every fear, every vanished soul preserved beneath its crooked grin. Generations passed, and the parish itself crumbled into ruin. The chapel bell, once rung to ward away storms and shadows, fell silent. Stones were swallowed by moss, pews rotted into the soil, and the ledger lay forgotten in a chest whose lock rusted through. Yet even as buildings decayed, the story endured. Villagers moved on, scattering to neighboring towns, but their children carried with them the same soft warnings. Do not laugh too loud at night, do not leave candles burning when you sleep, and never, ever call the hollow child by name. What makes Labubu's legend so haunting is that it did not fade like so many others. Travelers in distant villages, far removed from the original hollow, began to report the same strange details: toys left in circles along lonely roads, bite marks pressed into their wooden edges, the faint sound of giggling when no children were near. Families would swear that in the briefest flash of lamplight, they glimpsed a small figure darting at the edge of vision, its ears long, its teeth white against the dark, its eyes too bright, too knowing, always smiling. The scholars who dared study the tale called it a trickster myth, a way of teaching children restraint, a relic of superstition. But superstition alone cannot explain why the details remain unchanged, carried like a contagion from mouth to mouth, era to era. No one remembers who first spoke the name, yet everyone remembers the rules. The hollow child is never mocked, never invited, never given the chance to listen. And yet listening is exactly what it does best. Even now, in villages forgotten by maps, parents still hush their children with warnings. Some say they have woken in the night to the sound of footsteps too small to belong to any thief, circling the outside of their homes. Others claim to have found toys that were never theirs, left neatly by their doors at dawn, bearing the mark of unseen teeth. And though few dare to admit it aloud, many believe the ledger is still being written. Perhaps not in ink, perhaps not even on paper, but somewhere beyond sight, every careless laugh, every scream, every disappearance preserved beneath the crooked smile of the hollow child. So if you ever hear laughter when no laughter should be, if you ever find a toy where no child has played, remember the rule whispered through centuries. Never laugh too loudly in the dark. Never leave your candle burning as you dream. For Labubu smiles still, and the ledger is never full. So if you ever hear laughter when no laughter should be, if you ever find a toy where no child has played, remember the rule whispered through centuries. Never laugh too loudly in the dark. Never leave your candle burning as you dream. For Labubu smiles still, and the ledger is never full. And if you wish to walk further into these forgotten corridors of history, where shadows write what ink cannot, then join me here. Subscribe so the Hollow Child stories and others like it are never lost to silence.